happen in life is that the people who don't fit neatly into the categories are the people who aren't welcome, right? The people who either are very comfortable in binary categories or are willing to go along with the binary categories if they're not comfortable or see it as a means. But the other people get excluded and get left behind, and that's wrong. It's just wrong. And you see it in statistics about non-binary people's earning possibility, right? And trans people's employment discrimination, and people are housing discrimination. Right? People don't have the rights and access and justice that we all deserve because they're saying, you know what, I'm not going to do this thing that we all know is a little bit fictional anyway. But we're living in a world in which we pretend it's not. You're going to say something.
On the so on like driver's license and passports, it has the gender on it as well. And if you like buy a plane ticket, it oftentimes asks for the gender just to like get on an airplane,
which is fascinating, right? Because they have every other bit of information about us. Right. Sometimes they have your picture, and they have your fingerprints, and they have every address you've ever lived at in some database. Yet they need that letter.
It's also crazy because when you get on the airplane, they're not separating you by the gender you said you were. So why does that information even make a difference?
Because it has to match your passport.
Because of worries about fraud.
That's what they say.
Right?
That's what they say. That's their justification.
So an example of this in Philadelphia, you probably read about this. There's a scholar at Temple named Heath Fogg Davis who is just brilliant, and I think I mentioned him. He's wonderful. I think he would be a great speaker here. But he's a scholar activist and started to get involved after he heard from people about this problem of transit passes. And have you ever been on SEPTA in Philadelphia? It's a terrible system. But SEPTA had these monthly passes, and the only thing on your monthly pass was the month, the year, and your gender. And you were required to share your gender when you bought the pass. And the reason for this is it was fraud prevention. Because in a really heteronormative set of understandings, they were worried that the men with the M on the passes who bought these monthly passes to commute with their briefcases to their jobs would then share their passes with their wives who should have had an F, who would then use the official like commuting pass to do something else. So they were limiting it by only having, you know, an M or an F on the pass. It assumes that the only people who would fraudulently take somebody's pass are people of an oppositely binary defined gender. It's a nutty system. But what happened was that people's gender ended up being policed on buses and trains by the people who had to check their passes, who would look at the pass and look at the person and look at the pass and look at the person and say, right? I am an employee of SEPTA, and I am decreeing that you are a fraud, that your gender doesn't match this thing, and then you're kicked out, maybe I call the police, etc. Well, this is a major problem for anybody whose appearance doesn't meet the definition that this bus driver conductor thinks. But it's particularly a problem for people who are gender non-binary or trans. And it's not a problem that doesn't have consequences, because it means that even if everything works out, at a minimum, you're later than you wanted to be, you're not getting where you need to go, you're feeling unsafe, probably, because you have been made a spectacle of, you've been called out, disrespected, and inconvenienced. So after a lot of advocacy, where people in the community said, you know what, we noticed this, we've known this, but now we're putting a name on this, we're organizing, we're calling the newspapers, we're making a big deal. It was changed in 2013. Same thing happened in Chicago. People got organized, they started to speak up. In 2015, it changed. But it still persists some places. I learned just recently that in Baltimore, in the public transit system, students can get special student passes. But in order to get a student pass, you have to show your student ID. And you know what your student ID has to have on it? Your gender. So even though the transit pass doesn't require gender, your student ID that's required to get the transit pass requires a gender. And that probably will persist until people get organized, and draw attention and change that. Driver's licenses are changing. In Colorado and Minnesota, already, there's no gender designation on driver's licenses. In New York, that's changing this year, in 2019. In New Jersey, it's still required. Why? Because nobody's yet gotten together to organize to change that. And again, why do you need your gender on your driver's licenses? Are there rules for women and rules for men about driving? Of course not. Yes?
I have a question for you. And kind of circle back to what you were saying earlier on. Isn't it gender is based on an economic system which is based on the principle of a taxonomy system, which sets up, which is based on a classification system that simplifies for economics in terms of if you don't fit in the equation in terms of commerce, which favors male, particularly white male. If it doesn't favor you, something is wrong with the other. And therefore, to be accommodating, the system has to be disrupted, and it doesn't want to be disrupted. So therefore, it has to perpetuate itself in some various forms by segregation or being not inclusive. And I think that's what some of the arguments is about. It might percolate into other subtle things, but it's a classification system that provides a commerce for economics.
And provides a way for some people, that was beautifully said, some people to benefit, and some people not to benefit. And it does all, I mean, the binary gender does all happen in a system in which people with an M, historically and institutionally, tend to do better than people with an F. They tend to be paid more, right? They tend to have more freedom, more room to move. Yes?
Well, it strikes me to, and I didn't see who made that last point, but when you were talking about the prisons, a lot of it has to do with who's holding the power. And that's traditionally been that. And that's this whole thing that gets back into politics. Are we ready for a woman president? That's like, you know, the men don't want to give up that power. In the prisons, the guards don't want to give up the power. The SEPTA workers don't want to give up that power. So there's like these funny little laws that come up around it so that they don't have to share the power. They get to decide who gets it and who doesn't.
I totally buy your argument until we get to the SEPTA workers, and I'm just hard for me to imagine that they really want to hang on to that power. But
put a badge on them, man, it works. That puts every time.
What's worrisome is that that's exactly often where gender nonconforming people end up in contact with the criminal justice system, and that's the thing that makes it really dangerous, and that's the thing that moves it from a really awful, unjust interaction with an asshole to something that is more, even more scary and dangerous, because those enforcements, right, often involve calling the police. So I'm unsure about my own perception of the gender of this person who is perfectly capable of defining their own gender. Therefore, I'm going to call somebody a police officer because there ought to be a law. And that's what happens with the transit systems, right, with bouncers. There are a lot of cases of people in bars and nightclubs where bouncers are calling the police, or restaurants because they think people are in the wrong place. Stop and frisk in New York, right, had a huge impact on gender nonconforming people. Yes, you were going to say something?
I think also these types of ideas influence the general population about where they belong. So if I'm born with a vagina, then I'm getting taught, I'm getting conditioned and nurtured in a way where I might not feel as empowered or celebrated by voicing my concerns or speaking out. Or I think we all kind of are conditioned by all these different rules and regulations, and being influenced and figuring out where it is that we're supposed to be and where we don't belong.
The socialization about those gender norms and binaries is really, really powerful. Right? We all learn as children what the expectations are. We may refuse not to follow those rules, but we understand in a pretty visceral way when we're meeting those binary expectations and when we're not. Yeah.
Like me, I could go to a straight bar and drag. The boys, they know my years. They know who I am. I go to a bar and drag. The boys, they knew who I am. They brought in Jersey City, Israel. The boys want to ball with me. Females, they want to ball with me. They knew who I am.
Right. The right to be recognized, though, for who you are is a really fundamental aspect of human dignity, right? And I think we all want that in our own specific ways, right? People want to be seen for who they are and understood and respected for who they are, and that who they are is who each of us decides to be. Anybody who's ever been a teenager, right, has had the experience of saying to their parent or grandparent or guardian, that's not right. See me for who I am, not for the person you think I am, right, or the person you want me to be. It's fundamental to having moral standing and feeling like we're seen. To go back to the criminal justice system, though, is the incidence of being arrested or held in a cell strictly because of gender identity and expression, it is reported by an extraordinarily large number of gender non-binary or trans people, and it's particularly an issue for people of color. Right? Gender non-binary people who are black report that it happens at least 41% of the time. This is a major problem. The violence against black trans women is unconscionable. It is an epidemic. We saw so many examples here. It is violence against women, violence against trans women, violence against gender non-conforming women, but it happens repeatedly and overwhelmingly against people who are not white. I guess what I want us to think about today is, again, this question of what justice is, right, and when you speak up and when it matters. And I find myself sort of going through situations, we were talking about this a little, like thinking, where are those places of binaries, right? Where is it safe to challenge them, and where is it not safe to challenge them? I know that for me, it's safe to challenge those binaries quite a lot for a couple of reasons. One, I'm a middle-aged woman, so I'm largely invisible anyway. Right. Two, I have a PhD behind my name, so it can all be kind of kooky professor type thing. And three, I think it's important to just say things when they're not right. But I challenge you to think, and I'd love for us to talk here a little bit about where are those examples. Like if the City Hall in Jersey City now has gender-neutral bathrooms, why is it not a requirement that every bar and restaurant in Jersey City have gender-neutral bathrooms? Why is it that people deserve gender-neutral bathrooms only when they're, paying a parking ticket or getting a license? Why should we not all be able to pee in peace and safety anywhere in the city? That's an example. Right. Yeah.
I go to the measurement. I go to the women's measurement. I don't care. You go to the car. I got the shell car. So.
So you have the freedom.
Yeah.
And there's support behind you, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You got back up. I got Chipper encouraging. He said the genders, they put them with the men. I said they should put them with the men. Put them with the women instead of with the men. I said that's wrong. The one guy, he got raped and encouraged. So now he's still encouraged because somebody raped him. He got jumped, so they raped him, so now he's still encouraged. So now he's still encouraged jailhouse.
Wow, that's so unfortunate.
That's terrible.
It goes along the line, like you said earlier, is this when you have people that are incarcerated, they do not care.
No, they don't.
They don't care if you, one, you're just a number. Two, they're glorified babysitters, and they were like, okay, I don't care if he comes in gay, straight, bisexual, kids, one thing on his head. I don't care. He's just gonna sit in the cell and do what I say and what I say. We got some cotton, well, there you go. Until your time is up. Some people are like that, they just don't care.
That's because of the money too.
And because of the money, yeah, but also if you speak up on it and you start saying something about it, first thing is, oh, we tried this with the person, but they were acting outsiders. But you have a whole bunch of people that's already, they won't even step up.
No.
Like, what are you afraid of? I'm speaking up for myself, but also speaking up for the people that can't speak.
That's true.
But you still have people that's here that don't care. So you have to find a different way of fighting. And I'm like the type where I won't back down off a fight. I can't. Especially when it's my community. The whole community, just not one particular part of the whole. I can't see nobody not fighting for that. I can't.
When things change, they start with somebody speaking up, right? And they start with, and then joined by other people who are speaking up. Right? Say, we're not going to stand for it. It's wrong. One example, right now there's a campaign going on in New Jersey for driver's licenses. And it was framed originally around driver's licenses to be available for undocumented immigrants. But the truth is that New Jersey's 6-point system for driver's licenses eliminates a lot of people, right? It eliminates people who don't have those official forms of identification that have a gender marker that matches who they are and who they feel comfortable being. If they don't have that, they can't get a driver's license. This new way of having driver's licenses that won't work, frankly, to get on a plane with TSA, right? But they will work for driving and identification and all the rest, will apply to an awful lot of people, including undocumented immigrants and anybody who doesn't have the appropriate, the full number of identification documents. That's an example of a policy that actually works for the benefit of a lot of different communities, including people who don't fit and don't have the paperwork to prove that they are part of two distinct binary categories. You want to say something? So did we basically just solve it all? What's important to you in Jersey City that you're thinking about on this issue? I'm really interested to hear. I mean, a lot of people came out on a cold, dark night because you're interested in something about this topic, and I'm really interested to know what you care about. Housing. Another place in which there is a lot of gender discrimination.
And schooling.
And schooling. You want to say a little more about that?
When it comes to the schooling part, it's just for the younger sex. Because I know a lot of older sex, my generation and before, they don't even have high school diplomas. They're probably getting them now, but because they were uncomfortable in the school situation and trying to get comfortable in themselves, to alleviate that part, because school is tough. Forget the education factor, the peer pressure itself. That situation is difficult for LGBT youth. Then, now, and for others, period.
Especially making high school too, especially making a sniper. It's hard for kids. They always fighting every single day. Fighting each other. Fighting every day. The juniors fight each other. Y'all fight each other. It's like sneaking.
These kids are here to fight devils.
What about changes to include LGBT history in school?
And it's already difficult
Curriculum.
amongst the students, and then the teachers ain't going to see that. I'm not saying education-wise, I don't know, I've never been in public school, but I'm saying I know a lot of these teachers aren't, I don't know if this, do the board education give sensitivity classes or like they try how to, they don't, I'm assuming no, because they don't even teach proper teachers to handle overly hurting kids properly. Let's take the kid out, put the kid into a special school to make them feel different.
But now that my cousin she's a teacher. She ain't some kind of kids.
Well, that's why Hudson Pride is working to address that. We are.
Tell us what you're doing.
Well, we're working.
My kid in a special school like my kid is not normal.
Oh, okay.
Well, we're working closely with the schools, so we go inside and we present sensitivity and inclusive workshops to the students directly. As far as teachers and administration and staff of schools, they have the opportunity to utilize our training services where we can actually train their staff on LGBTQ terminology, sensitivity, the importance of having a background for everyone, the importance of representation, having a flag inside of the school so people know it's a safe space. So that's our goal with working directly with the schools. And until we get to a level where we're satisfied, we will continue on that journey. That's why tonight is important to have the support of all of you to bring these questions to us, bring these issues to the forefront. Hudson Pride is working on it, all right?
That's excellent. I mean, one of the things that makes it really challenging, can I just say one thing really quickly, is that often these injustices come to visibility only when somebody has already been hurt, right? Only when there's a kid who hasn't been able to do what they want to do or hasn't had the educational opportunity that they deserve, and only after the harm has already happened do we hear about it or notice it, which is why it's, I think, really helpful, and I admittedly am a little biased towards humanities, but I think it's really helpful to think about these questions when we go out in the world and try to anticipate where the barriers are that are arbitrary, that are just not needed, and to think about what we can do to try and break some of those down so that we can begin to address institutions and policies and make them more fair without having a single or group of individual people have to suffer, right? And to make themselves publicly known as having been suffered in order to raise awareness and change it. Yes, sorry.
Just to piggyback off of that, acknowledging Hudson Pride and the work that they've done. It took some time when I was on the Board of Education to educate myself on the issues concerning our LGBTQ students, and they really took the initiative, but unfortunately, honestly, the challenges with the culture within our administrators, our educators, who not everyone wants to move forward and support our children, and especially LGBTQ children. I know that at that time when I was on the school board, working with Hudson Pride and trying to get sensitivity training into all schools, there's also LGBTQ identified individuals within trying to push the teachers union, trying to push that into a level where they're making sure that their membership is also advocating, and there was some pushback as well. So I think more of the education, and as was stated earlier, Hudson Pride is really pushing and trying, but I think more advocacy from the community to help make sure that individuals get their feet to the fire. You know, unfortunately, a lot of our children are suffering because folks have this old mentality or this mentality of not acknowledging that this community is also very important, and that our children need our support and help in order to be free to identify the way that they feel is best for them.
Because there are a lot of places in which gender binaries really don't matter and shouldn't matter. One place that they absolutely should matter, in my view, is when they are the identity that's claimed by an individual. Right? That should matter, and that should be the very first thing. But finding those other opportunities to take systems that are unjust and cruel and confront them and change them is really, really important. The truth is, Jersey City is ahead of the rest of the state of New Jersey in a lot of ways, and you should all be really proud of that at Hudson Pride. It deserves enormous credit for that. But there's still, as we're going to do, there's still a long way to go. And we can do more. We can do more. Other ideas? I'm happy to just sit down.
I'm still on that. Like, what happens to the trans guy or girl who ends up, it has to end up in a shelter situation?
That is a terrible situation.
Because maybe about like 13 years ago, I was going through a situation and I didn't want to be bothered with anyone. I'll do this on my own. And I went to welfare and they sent me to St. Lucy's. And at the time, my ID and everything still said male. It still said my birthday at the time. And while I'm sitting here doing intake, I don't know if the person was trans, non-conforming, or just overtly feminine guy who looked like he dresses up. I do not know. The thing is, I'm watching them get attacked, and you just turned your head, oh, I'm not staying in here. You know, lost your mind. I'm like, y'all not gonna do nothing? What can we do? They fight all the time. So you expect me to go in here? Oh, no. So, and welfare gets up telling me nothing I can do. I gotta go in 30 days. If I go in here for 30 days and somebody assaults me or hurt me, what are y'all gonna do? because you're making me go in here. So I had to go to Red Cross to get Red Cross and let's celebrate to put me at Belmont House. And that was even a problem. My first 2 nights. Obviously, I'm made to go to the mail's room on the floor. I went in there, one guy I think him looking at me, he tried to follow me in the bathroom. I didn't get to lock the door, you kind of come in the door, oh, I can't do this. Do something. Then they gave me one of the female keys. Told me to stay at the men's room. A lesbian had an issue. He was calling me sis all day long until they gave me that female key. Now you're telling me I refuse to share a bathroom with a male. So now I can't go around attacking everybody, but I'm not gonna keep letting them disrespect me. Because then I'm gonna become violent and then I'm gonna hurt the aggressor instead of the victim. I don't wanna be the victim either, but you're not gonna make me to a victim and you're not gonna cause me to bring my nasty side out and become the aggressor. But I just wanna be at peace. So ultimately, I threatened to call the Jersey Journal when the lady who was running it at the time. So the main manager, he given me a double room that's meant for a mother and child or a husband and wife that had his own bathroom just so I could be in peace. But I took space from someone who should have been in a room together, a double room that has its own bathroom, just so I can be able to shower and go to the bathroom in peace.
And that's a situation that you end up having to be the advocate for in order to come up with solutions and keep advocating for yourself, right? It put you in the situation of having to solve a problem that they created that should not have been there in the first place. And I think it's wrong. Right? That still persists in a lot of places.
But I know that after me, and that's probably coming now.
Yes.
Going through this, that has been having it hard, even harder, that is not going to know what to say, not going to know how to react. And some people do frazzle easily, some people do scare easily and fold quickly.
There are some shelters that provide spaces for LGBT youth in particular, right, and for non-binary people or trans people, but there are not very many of them. And they often are not in easy to get to places, right? So maybe, I think there is one in Newark, I can't remember what it's called, right? But there, I don't know if there is anywhere else in the state of New Jersey.
What about in Delaware?
Sorry?
What if it's like a 30-year-old male or female, a trans or I don't know about it, who doesn't have a record, who doesn't have a drug problem,
right?
They get fell on hard time.
Alyssa, New York is ahead of the game with us on a lot of that. One is certain places to go, certain shelters, things like that. Jersey, there are a few, as you mentioned. There's also the Triad House, which is in Ewing, but it's age-based, right? So after you've aged out, there's nowhere else. So there's nothing right now specifically for LGBTQ people of all ages, unfortunately, in New Jersey, period.
I will say Perk Shelter that's located in Union City has been one shelter that's been working with Hudson Pride, and we've been able to facilitate trainings to them and their staff so that they can be more inclusive. So if I would have to recommend a place that people can go to feel safe, that identifies LGBTQ, I would recommend Perk Shelter if they can get into Union City. And as for Tom, he knows us there, but that is one place that has been working with us out of all the shelters here in Hudson County.
And unfortunately, it's as safe as they can make it, but the other individuals who are there, using the same services, if they are narrow-minded or uneducated, then it becomes the problems you're talking about. And it all goes back to changing people's minds, changing the idea around trans and non-binary, changing the thought process of all of these different programs in society as a whole. Otherwise, everything is always going to be at jeopardy, and we're never going to make that much of a difference. So it goes back to the change, which I think is why we all came today to discuss it.
And the change is really hard to do because we are all, many of us, I was raised in this culture or in cultures like it that take these things as if they are real and natural and inevitable.
I think that something that we can do in Jersey City is that they're opening up a new homeless shelter downtown. I forget what it's called. But it's like right by St. Peter's Prep. It's going to be like a 300-bed shelter, I think. So as a community, we can start advocating for there to be specific population.
And just so you know, Hudson Pride's already talked to the mayor, and we are going to be training all the staff that are going to be in that facility as well. And it's going to be a while before they open, but we will be, you know, discussing LGBT-specific support and housing and things like that. I don't know if they'll do that, but they've already agreed to take on our trainings for the people working there.
That's great, Hudson Pride. Anybody else? I can sit down and we can just all talk together. Thank you very much.
Has anyone sat down with the JCPD?
Well, actually, Jersey City Police Department has an LGBTQ police liaison, and we work very closely. Say it again? The person is not in here now.
But they do come to a lot of our events.
And they actually assisted us with community outreach, where we were able to go out into the community with plainclothes officers to provide safer sex kits to, our target was trans women who are engaged in sex work. So we were able to approach people with condoms, lube, our business cards, and some other things to provide them with while they're out working, to let them know in the future, if you have some time, stop by Hudson Pride, we can help you get tested. We can give you unlimited condoms and lube, and really talk to you about barriers that you're experiencing, so we can help you address them. So while we know the police department is a tough department, right, I will say we have a police liaison right here in Jersey City. That's amazing, because not all police departments have that. So I was standing up to maybe move for you, but I want to speak on that too.
No, that's excellent. I just want to say that public policy is about making choices. Right? Public policy is not inevitable. It didn't just fall from the sky in great big books. They're decisions made by people with power, or they're decisions made by people who are using the power they have. And everybody here has power, right? Various kinds of power, but everybody here has power. And when you use your power to make different decisions and work collectively, you can make the kinds of changes that you're already seeing happen, and maybe some of the ones that we're identifying that need to happen, so that people don't have to have experiences that others in the community have had, and so people don't have to trade identity and dignity for safety. Thank you.